Recording in progress.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله، الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا مولانا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك وعلمنا من لدنك علما ينفعنا في الدين والدنيا يا كريم. اللهم لا تحرمنا خير ما عندك وشر ما عندنا. الحمد لله. This is our, I don't know, 30 something. I believe it is the 34th or 35th class. Alhamdulillah, and inshallah the last one. And inshallah it's a good amount of classes for someone. You can play them inshallah over and over again. Get the gist of the ahkam. Some masail, some abwab we weren't able to go into detail, some we were. But inshallah ta'ala, it teaches you the basics, what you need to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, towards the end of fiqh, there's one section in fiqh that the scholars, we could say, differ around where to put it. Some of them put it in certain parts of fiqh, others put it in other places, and that is the book of food and drinking. Okay, food and drinking, or the book of slaughtering animals and the conditions of that. The Shafi'iyah usually put it towards the end of fiqh, So the end of fiqh usually has the book of drinking and eating, the book of al-ayman wal-nudur, so taking oaths and swearing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rulings of that. And then the last final thing in fiqh is what? Is the book of slavery, of al-'itq, of freeing slaves. And we mentioned at the beginning of our classes that the reason the fuqaha put this at the end of fiqh is that it's a way of suddenly asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free them from Nar Jahannam. So today we are speaking about food and drinks. The section in Abu Shuja is known as al-Dhaba'ih was-Sayd. Al-Dhaba'ih was-Sayd. What does that mean? Dhabiha means an animal that is slaughtered, yes? And Sayd is hunting. So slaughtering and hunting, these are the two ways a person is able to consume meat in Islam. Now, the main focus in this chapter will be teaching us what makes an animal halal to consume and what animals are halal to consume. Now, slaughtering, whether it's hunting or not hunting. So an animal needs to be slaughtered in, let's say, in one of these two ways. Slaughtering itself or killing an animal in an Islamic way itself has pillars to it. Okay, so as we have been studying the different acts of worship and the different acts of mu'amalat, we always say that the section of fiqh is built up from and made up from a certain number of pillars that it's made up from. The first thing we always do in fiqh is what? We summarize these pillars, we make sure we know them, and then we start to study the conditions of every single pillar, and that always makes a lawful interaction and act in fiqh. If one of the conditions are missing, then it would not be lawful, it would be haram usually. Buying and selling is the same thing, getting married the same thing, hunting and slaughtering the same thing. Okay, so the pillars of halal slaughtering are, number one, slaughtering. So the action itself. Okay, the action that happens when you put the knife to an animal, for example. Okay, that process. That's the first pillar. The second one is the animal that is being slaughtered. So it has to be an animal there. Slaughtering can't happen without an animal. Okay, and there's going to be conditions for that animal. The third one is the slaughterer, the person slaughtering. It has to be someone who is slaughtering. It's not permissible to eat a meat that was not killed by a person. Let's say the animal died by itself, it fell. And then we're going to talk in detail, inshallah. We're going to mention that it's just a machine that someone's pressing. There's no one killing it. It doesn't count. Okay, and then the last thing is the machine itself, or the knife, or the utensil that's being used to slaughter the animal. Okay, so we have four different pillars that make up Islamic and halal slaughtering. Okay, inshallah, we go into them in detail with Allah Ta'ala. So the first one is the slaughtering itself, or the action that includes the animal losing its life. Okay, slaughtering itself, or this action, is two types. There's two types, and these types are regarding the animals and the types of animals that we deal with. There are either animals that we have control over. So an animal that we can hold down, we can put a knife to its throat and say Bismillah and kill it. Okay, that's the first category. And the second category is animals that we do not have control over. So, for example, we are in need of eating. We're in the outback, and there's an animal that's jumping and running up and down, a deer or a kangaroo or something, and we're not able to hold it down and slaughter it. We tried our best, but we can't. Okay, this is considered an animal that we do not have control over, and each one of these have their own rulings. Okay, the first one is what is known as dhabh, or slaughtering. The second one is known as hunting, or as-sayd. Okay, now for animals that we have control over, the conditions for making these animals halal is to cut two things. Okay, two things need to be cut. Number one, what is known as al-hulqum, or al-halq, and the second one is what's known as al-mari. Al-halq wal-mari. Okay, two things. Now, how many components is the throat made up from, or the neck, the whole neck made up? Many. Okay, you have, for example, you have the airway, you have the passage for food, you have the veins, you have many things. So what you need to cut through in the Shafi'i madhab is the halq, which is the throat or the airway, and then al-mari, which is known as the foodway. These two things need to be cut. What's the third? Huh? The vein at the back. In the Shafi'i madhab, it's sunnah, it's mustahab to cut, but you don't need to. In other madhab, the Maliki madhab, it's compulsory to cut as well. Okay, it's compulsory to cut in the Maliki madhab. In the Shafi'i madhab, all you need to cut is the foodway and the airway. Okay, and then the animal becomes halal. Okay. Now, if just part of them is cut, it doesn't count. It has to be cut through the whole thing. It has to be cut through properly, so that all the blood can leave the body. Okay. Now, animals that we don't have control over, you don't have to cut through their throat or anything. Okay. In the Shafi'i madhab, they need to be cut through, meaning you shoot them or you harm them with something that cuts. It doesn't knock them out. It cuts. It makes them bleed. Okay. That could be an arrow. It could be something you throw. It could be a bird that you sent against them. You cut them in a part of the body, okay, and that cut leads immediately to death. They have to die from that cut. Can't just injure them, then they die later on out of pain or whatever. No, they have to die immediately from that cut. If it's said, it's hunting, and they die from that cut itself, then we're allowed to eat. Okay, that's basically the two situations regarding slaughtering an animal. Okay, so just to make it clear, we have here four things that I mentioned in fiqh. Okay, the top part is called al-jawza, so that I think Adam's apple in English. Okay, underneath you have al-wadijain, okay, which is the veins. Okay, the two veins. Then you have al-mari, which is the red part, and you have al-hilqum, which is the middle part. So you need to do the thick red part, and the middle part needs to be cut. The veins on the side don't need to be cut. Okay. Another example here, it's a bit more clear, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll have to cut where the knife is. You'll have to cut through the here, which says al-mari, and then al-halq, but you don't need to cut through the rest of the different veins and lines in the animal. Okay. Inshallah ta'ala. Now the next thing we're going to go is going on to the act of slaughtering. So we said that slaughtering is two types, either ذبح or either صيد, either slaughtering or either hunting. Both of them have the same conditions, other than what we mentioned. Okay, so they differ in what? In the area you need to cut. Okay, other than that, they have the same conditions. What are these conditions? The first thing is to intend the action. To intend the action. Okay, so you have to intend to slaughter the animal. What does that mean? Doesn't mean you make intention like you're in salah. Okay, but what it means is that you can't accidentally kill that animal. Okay, you can't just go around with your knife and kill whatever animals are around you. For example, you have to specifically try to kill that specific animal. Okay. So for example, they say if an individual had a knife in his hand, okay, and the knife fell from the hand and cut through the throat of an animal, it wouldn't count as that. Why? Because it was an accident. Okay. The second thing they say is to intend an animal also. You intend to kill and intend an animal. So you have to make sure you intend to kill an animal. You say I'm going to kill a person, and then you actually kill an animal, doesn't count. And then the last thing you have to do is to intend the specific animal. So if there was two sheep there, and you meant to kill one, but by accident you just killed the wrong one, it wouldn't count either. Okay, so you have to specify the animal you're killing for it to be considered a dhabh and slaughtering an animal, and not be considered a meita or a dead animal. Okay, what's the difference between a dead animal in Sharia and between a halal animal? Basically, it's the Muslim person coming to the animal, killing it in a halal way, and intending to kill it and cutting it in the right way. That's what makes up the proper dhabh in Sharia. Okay? So now, inshallah, if we go back, we said that we have slaughtering, okay? Slaughtering the animal. And we mentioned the conditions of slaughtering the animal. We then have the animal itself and what types of animal are halal and haram. And then we have the person who kills the animal and the knife that kills the animal. We finished the first type. We're going to go into the second type now, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. Before we go into the second type, there's a few sunnah actions, recommended actions that are recommended when you cut. They're not compulsory, but they're recommended. The first thing is to cut through the veins also. The second thing is to sharpen the knife. Okay, make it sharp, very sharp. The third thing is to make the animal face the qibla. The fourth thing is to say Bismillah when you kill it. And the last thing that most people leave out is to send salah and salam for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bismillah, Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad. You kill the animal. Okay, that is all recommended in Sharia. But what about the slaughter? The person who slaughters the animal. The person who slaughters the animal needs to be one of two. Okay? Meaning that every person in the universe who slaughters an animal and doesn't fulfill these conditions, no matter if they follow all the conditions of slaughtering, all the things that we mentioned, if they're not one of these two, it doesn't count. Okay? What are they? Number one, to be Muslim. Okay? What is a Muslim? The person who says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. If we just hear someone say that or we know they're Muslim, that's enough. We don't have to look into any more of that. The second thing is to either be a Muslim or to be a kitabi. What is a kitabi? Person of a book. Okay? And we mentioned many times in our fiqh classes the definition of a kitabi. If you remember in nikah, what do we say? Who remembers? In nikah, we spoke about the definition of a kitabi. We said a kitabi is someone in the Shafi'i madhab whose lineage is all the same religion until the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, and we said that basically the conditions of a kitabi or book in fiqh today don't really exist at all. So for us today, basically we only eat from a Muslim who slaughtered an animal. Okay. The second condition is specific to hunting. We said there's two types of slaughtering, yes? There's either ذبح or صيد. ذبح, slaughtering the animal to be Muslim or Kitabi, that's it. Even if the person is blind, okay? If they know what they're doing, Bismillah, they can feel the throat is here, Bismillah, and they get that, and they cut through both layers. They cut through the throat and also the food passage. Then, Alhamdulillah, you can eat it. If it's in hunting, they say the hunter cannot be blind if you're hunting, okay? You can't be. Why? If you're gonna, throw something at the animal or send an animal off, you need to be able to see the animal, and inshallah we'll go into more details of that later on. Right. So now we finished the conditions of slaughtering itself, the conditions of the person who slaughters. What about the animal itself? The animal has two conditions, okay? The first thing is it has to be a halal kind of animal, a permissible type of animal, okay? An animal that Allah Ta'ala made halal with us. We say that generally there are most animals are considered halal. And there's some animals Allah Ta'ala made it haram to eat even if they are slaughtered, okay? We'll study them in a few moments, inshallah ta'ala. But that's the first thing. We'll go into the detail of that. Second thing is it needs to have full life when being slaughtered. Full life, okay? What does that mean? You can be sleepy or tired, it's fine. But what? It has to have full life, meaning that if you, let's say even if someone was to strike it with some electricity or something, it comes back to life. If you leave it, it comes back to life, okay? It doesn't die if you leave it, if you don't wake it up, okay? So the animal by itself comes back to life. That means it has full life, proper life, okay? That's the animal you can kill. If it's dying, it's just about to die, but it didn't die yet, and you slaughter it, it doesn't count. In many countries, especially poor countries, they slaughter animals that are about to die. Yes, it's dying, before it does, it's already on its way to die. Then, in many cases, it's not permissible. But the last thing we said, is the knife or whatever is used to slaughter the animal. Okay, the knife or whatever is used to slaughter the animal. What are the conditions of this? Okay, the first condition they say is to be sharp. What does sharp mean? Inshallah, we're studying fiqh for a while, so we should understand what the fuqaha mean. Sharp doesn't mean the sunnah sharp we mentioned before, is that to be very sharp. No, it means that it's good enough to cut through the throat. That's what sharp means, okay? It's good enough to cut through the throat, okay? That's what it means, okay? So just as long as it's able to cut. The second thing is to not be from bone. To not be made from bone. Someone makes a knife out of some type of bone, even if it's sharp, even if they say Bismillah, whatever, the animal is halal, it doesn't count. Why? Prophet says, لَيْسَ السِّنُّ وَالْعَظَمُ. In Sahih Bukhari, he says, مَا أَنْهَى الدَّمُ وَذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ فَكُلْ. Whatever makes the blood flow, and Allah Ta'ala's name is mentioned on it, eat. Even though we say mention the name of Allah Ta'ala, the Shafi'i madhab means the person is Muslim. Doesn't mean that you have to physically mention it, okay? And whatever doesn't, don't eat. Whatever doesn't, don't eat. This is in Sahih Bukhari in the Battle of Khaybar, when the Muslims had nothing to eat, they were hunting. And they said, we don't know what we're hunting with, yeah? And then he says, لَيْسَ السِّنُّ وَالْعَظَمُ. Everything counts other than something is made from a tooth or something that is made from a bone. Something that is made from a tooth or something that is made from a bone. Okay. So, basically, if we are killing it ourselves, we're cutting it with a knife, it can be made from plastic, it can be made from anything, as long as it's not from a bone, nor from a tooth of an animal. Okay. The second thing is if we're not able to catch the animal. So we're talking about sayd. Yes, you're hunting now. Not dhabh, but sayd. In sayd, okay, if we are doing sayd and we're sending another animal to catch the animal for us, there's an extra condition. What is that? That the animal, okay, the animal that hunts for us is considered mu'allam, considered learned. What is a learned animal? There's conditions for an animal to be learned. The first one is that they go after the prey if they're ordered. This animal, you say go, hunt the animal, it'll go. It understands what you're saying. The first thing. Second thing is if you stop it, it stops. Stop running, it stops straight away. Okay? Number three, that the animal doesn't eat from the dead animal, no matter what. Okay? Now, if it eats later on, after you finish eating and you give it some food, it's fine. but it doesn't go itself. Then why? Because you don't know the intention of the animal. Maybe even though they learned, maybe they had an intention to do it for themselves, that it's not considered safe. Okay, the animal has to act just like an arrow for you, has to act just like a knife for you. That's it. That's it. Okay. The last thing is to be tested multiple times. So if the animal does this, but you didn't test it a few times, it doesn't count. It has to be an animal that you've tested, you've made it hunt a few times, and it always gets it right. Then it's considered معلم. In the Quran, it says معلمين مكلبين تعلمونهن مما علمكم الله. Yes, that you can use dogs to hunt if they are taught from what Allah Ta'ala taught you. Even when you hunt, hunting is a skill that Allah Ta'ala taught us. Yes, we didn't make it for ourselves. So we teach others, but it all goes back to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So reminding us Subhanahu wa Ta'ala about His blessing, teaching us even how to hunt. طيب. If we didn't know from Allah Ta'ala how to hunt, we would be stuck. There'll be animals around us, we don't know how to eat it. Subhanallah. Allah Ta'ala, He's the one who guides and teaches us how to hunt. Okay. Now, if it's a bird of prey, there's one less condition. One less condition. What is that? Birds of prey are not required to stop if you tell them. Why? They're flying in the middle of the sky. Okay? The birds of prey are not flying next to anyone. You can't just call them and tell them to stop. It's not that simple. So if it's a bird of prey, they have to be able to get the prey if you tell them. They not eat from the prey to be tested multiple times, but you don't have to stop if you tell them to stop. Okay? خلاص. Other than that, these are the conditions of the animals that hunt for us. Okay? Now, alhamdulillah, just to summarize, we've now just finished, we just covered the pillars of halal slaughtering. We said the slaughtering action itself, the animal, the person, and the knife. And every one of these have conditions. We finished, we said the slaughtering itself we said it has to be done with the intention of the animal. The individual has to intend to kill the animal, intend the animal, and specify the animal. We said the sunnah actions as well. We covered the conditions of the slaughterer, being a Muslim or Kitabi, and to have sight if they're hunting, the conditions of the animal, to be a halal animal, and to have full life, the conditions of the knife. Now, inshallah ta'ala, like I said, after we finish reading Abu Shuja, we'll go into what animals are halal and what animals are haram. But now just read the text of Abu Shuja, then we'll go back to it, inshallah ta'ala. So, Abu Shuja, rahimahullah ta'ala, says, كتاب الصيد والذبائح بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما قدر على ذكاته فذكاته في حلقه ولبته وما لم يقدر على ذكاته فذكاته عقره حيث قدر عليه وكمال الذكاة 4 أشياء قطع الحلقوم والمريء والودجين والمجزئ منها شيئان قطع الحلقوم والمريء ويجوز الاصطياد بكل جارحة معلمة من السباع ومن الجوارح الطير وشرائط تعليمهن 4 أن يكون إذا أرسلت استرسلت وإذا زجرت انزجرت وإذا قتلت صيدا لم تأكل منه وأن يتكرر ذلك منها فإن عدم أحد هذه الشرائط لم يحل ما أخذته إلا أن يترك حيا فيذكى ويجوز ذكاة كل ما يجرح إلا بالسن ويجوز الذكاة بكل ما يجرح إلا بالسن والظفر نعم وتحل ذكاة كل مسلم وكتابي ولا تحل ذكاة مجوسي ولا وثني وذكاة الجنين بذكاة أمه إلا أن يوجد حيا فيذكى. إن شاء الله تعالى. نعم وذكاة الجنين بذكاة أمه إلا أن يوجد حيا فيذكى وما قطع من حي فهو كميتته إلا الشعور المنتفع بها في المفارش والملابس. نعم. فصل وكل حيوان استطابته العرب فهو حلال إلا ما ورد الشرع بتحريمه وكل حيوان استخبثته العرب فهو حرام إلا ما ورد الشرع بإباحته ويحرم من السباع ما له ناب قوي يعدو به ويحرم من الطير ما له مخلب قوي يجرح به ويحل للمضطر في المخمصة أن يأكل من الميتة المحرمة ما يسد به رمقه ولنا ميتتان حلالان السمك والجراد ودمان حلالان الكبد والطحال. فصل والأضحية سنة مؤكدة ويجزئ في الجذع من الضأن، والثني من المعز، والثني من الإبل، والثني من البقر. وتجزئ البدنة عن 7، والبقرة عن 7، والشاة عن 1. وأربعة لا تجزئ في الضحايا: العوراء البين عورها، والعرجاء البين عرجها، والمريضة البين مرضها، والعجفاء التي ذهب مخها من الهزال. ويجزئ الخصي والمكسور القرن، ولا يجزئ المقطوع الأذن والذنب. وقت الذبح من صلاة العيد إلى غروب الشمس آخر أيام التشريق. ويستحب عند الذبح 5 أشياء: التسمية والصلاة على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، واستقبال القبلة، والذبيحة، والتكبير، والدعاء والقبول بالقبول. ولا يأكل المضحي شيئا من الأضحية المنذورة، ويأكل من الأضحية المتطوع بها، ولا يبيع من الأضحية، ويطعم الفقراء والمساكين. فصل: والعقيقة مستحبة، وهي الذبيحة عن المولود يوم سابعه، ويذبح عن الغلام شاتان، وعن الجارية شاة، ويطعم الفقراء والمساكين. بسم الله.
Slaughtering. When possible, an animal is slaughtered by cutting its throat or at the base of the neck. An animal which it is not possible to slaughter, as mentioned above, is slaughtered by wounding it however one can until it dies.
Okay, let's summarize what we said. We said that if it's صيد, it has its own conditions. If it's a ذبح, it has its own conditions. This is how Imam Abu Shuja summarized them. No.
The complete way of slaughtering is to cut 4 things.
This is the animal that we are able to slaughter. Yes. Now this is the complete way, including the sunnah acts. Okay, and then the second way is going to be just doing the minimum. No.
Number 1, the throat. Number 2, the esophagus. And number 3, both jugular veins. What suffices is cutting 2 things: A, the throat, and B, the esophagus.
And just like we said,
hunting. It is permissible to hunt using all types of trained, predatory land animals and predatory birds. There are 4 conditions for the animal being trained. A, when it is sent, it goes. B, when it is told to stop, it stops. C, if it kills the prey, it eats nothing from it. And D, it does the above repeatedly. If one of the above conditions is missing, its prey is not permissible to eat unless it is still alive when a human takes it and it is slaughtered. The implement. It is permissible to slaughter using any implement that draws blood, except for teeth and fingernails. Various rulings. Animals slaughtered by all Muslims and people of the book are lawful. Slaughtering performed by Majus and idolaters is unlawful.
Okay. Now, in fiqh, there's 3 categories, okay, or 4. There's Muslim, and then there's al-kitabi, which is a person of a book, and then man lahum shubhatu kitab. What's that mean? People who have something that's similar to a book. Okay, it's not 100% clear what they go back to, but they have some type of old ancient religion, and of course, al-majus or fire worshippers would be considered people who have shubha to kitab. Yani, looking back into their history, they have many things that seem like they had a proper message, and the Prophet ﷺ in many hadith, or Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, made specific rulings to them, different to the mushrikeen, the people who don't have a book. Basically, they're somewhere in between. Okay, and this tells us that many nations out there might have had books before us, but the Sharia, the fiqh ruling, only applies to the Jews and the Christians, with also strict conditions to them. No.
An unborn animal is slaughtered by slaughtering its mother, unless it remains alive. In that case, it too is slaughtered.
Okay, so if an animal's pregnant, okay, and you want to slaughter the animal, and there's a baby in the stomach, by slaughtering the mother, immediately the baby becomes halal. Unless you open the stomach and the baby is still alive, then you slaughter the baby as well. Okay, but this comes back from a hadith: "Zakatul janini, zakatu ummihi." Yes, so the slaughtering of the baby in the womb happens by slaughtering the mother. This hadith in the Sunan was taken by Imam Shafi'i literally, that if you slaughter the animal, khalas, then it's slaughtering the mother counts. But other fuqaha might have another understanding, that the slaughtering of the animal, of the baby, must be done just the same way the mother is slaughtered. Imam Shafi'i takes it literally. He says, if the baby doesn't live after you've opened the stomach, then khalas, as long as you slaughter the mother, it's halal also. Okay? Good.
Whatever is severed from a living animal is the same as if it came from the animal without it being properly slaughtered. except for hair from an edible animal, which can be used for bedding and clothes.
نعم. Okay. Now, we mentioned this in Tahara. We said, if something is cut off from a person, what's the ruling of that thing? It's tahir. Why is it tahir? Because the person is tahir, yes? A person is pure. And basically, whether the person is Muslim, kafir, no matter what it is, a person is never najis, never impure. Okay? Dead or alive, you're pure. Doesn't matter. So if something is cut off from you, it's pure. Second thing, we said that if an animal is halal to be eaten in its lifetime, and you cut off a piece of the animal, what is the ruling? It's impure. Why? Because that animal, if it's not slaughtered, it's what? It's impure. So animals that are dead are all impure. Dead animals are all impure, yes or no? Except what? Except mankind and fish and lotus. Yeah? Other than that, animals are all impure when they're dead. طيب. Sayyidina Rasulullah says, ما أبين من حي فهو كميتة. It's a hadith actually, yes? Whatever is removed from an animal that is alive takes the ruling of it as if it's dead. Means not if it's slaughtered, bismillah, no, if it's dead by itself, it dies by itself. Now, next.
Different types of foods. Everything edible that the Arabs during the time of the Prophet ﷺ considered wholesome is lawful, except for things that the Sharia specifically declared unlawful. Everything edible that the Arabs during the Prophet ﷺ's time considered disgusting is unlawful, except for those things the Sharia specifically declares lawful.
But we said we're going to get to that in a minute, inshallah. So we give a specific slide about what is halal, what's haram. But generally, it's according to what the Arabs used to consider edible or not at their time. So basically, for example, eating a mouse would be unlawful. Why? The Arabs would consider that disgusting. It would not be halal, even if you said Bismillah and killed them. Okay? Let's say eating the animal that's known as a dab. It's a type of lizard, okay? In the desert. The Arabs used to find that permissible and acceptable. In the Shafi'i madhab, it's halal to eat. In the Hanafi madhab, it's haram. But in the Shafi'i madhab, it's halal to eat. Why? Because the Arabs used to consider that to be a source of meat that they would eat. Same thing as any other animal. It goes back to what the Arabs consider. And like I said, we'll get to the detail in a minute, inshallah.
Predatory land animals that have strong fangs used for injuring prey are unlawful. Predatory birds that have strong talons used for wounding are unlawful.
No, so animals that live off their beak or off their teeth, okay? Okay, so what would be the ruling of eating a lion? Haram, okay? A tiger? Haram. A leopard? Crocodile? In the Shafi'i madhab, it's haram also, yes. What's in Arabic? What is the ضبع? Hyena? Hyena. Halal. Yes. In the Shafi'i madhab, it's halal to eat a hyena. Yeah, it's permissible. The Prophet ﷺ says, الضبع صيد. A hyena is a type of صيد, animal that can be hunted. Yes. And the Arabs used to eat it and still eat it till today. Yes. If you go to Saudi, to Emirates, those countries, the Bedouins, they eat it. They eat hyenas. They don't eat any other animal other than hyenas. Yes. Until today, they eat it. No.
It is permissible for someone on the verge of starvation.
Of course, and one more thing, hyenas don't hunt with their teeth. Okay? Yeah.
It is permissible for someone on the verge of starvation to consume meat from an animal that has not been properly slaughtered and is unlawful to consume, to the extent necessary to preserve life. Two types of
So every time you're about to die, you eat enough to keep you alive. Yeah, we don't eat, wallahi, a 3-course meal. Just enough to keep yourself alive, then you don't eat. You're gonna die again, you can do that again.
Two types of unslaughtered flesh are lawful for us. Number 1, fish, and number 2, locusts. Two types of blood are lawful for us. Number one, the liver, and number two, spleen.
This is from the hadith أحل لنا ميتتان ودمان. Yes, it's been made halal for us to have two types of dead animals and two types of blood. The two dead animals are what? Fish and locusts. Okay, so you can eat them even though we don't slaughter them. Yes, and the types of blood are liver and الطحال, spleen. So basically, these are not blood itself, but they're full of blood. They're full of blood. Okay, and if you were to mix them up in a blender, what happens? You just get blood. Then it becomes haram. Okay, then it becomes haram in the Shafi'i method. If you mix it up and you make it into a little like drink, you can't have it. Okay, but it's allowed to eat in its form when it's fleshy, although it's full of blood. Only then it's halal to eat. So when you eat liver, don't make it into liver puree. You know, in France they have this. Yeah. No.
Offering sacrifices. Offering an animal sacrifice, al-Ghayah, is an emphasized sunnah. The following suffice for sacrifices.
Yeah.
Number one, a 1-year-old male sheep. Number two, a 2-year-old male goat. Number three, a 5-year-old camel. And number four, a 2-year-old cow.
We spoke about udhiyah in the time of Hajj, so we won't go into detail again, inshallah. Okay, but Abu Shuja mentions it here. No.
One adult camel suffices for 7 individual sacrifices. One adult cow suffices for 7. And one female sheep suffices for an individual. Defective animals. The following defects render the animal insufficient as a sacrifice. When the animal, number one, has obviously lost an eye. Number two is obviously lame. Number three is obviously sick. Or number four is so sick that it is senseless. An animal that is castrated or has a broken horn suffices.
Basically, okay, we studied this, I said before, but just to remind you, the defects that affect the meat of the animal make it haram. Not haram to eat, but basically not consider it to be sufficient in udhiyah. Okay, so the udhiyah has to be an animal that has good meat, basically. Okay, if an animal has one of its horns broken, does it affect the meat? It doesn't affect the meat. Okay, if an animal has its private parts cut off, does it affect the meat? It actually makes the meat better. Okay, but when it's very sick, very weak, when it can hardly walk, these are usually signs that the animal is not fed well. No.
And an animal whose ear or tail has been cut does not suffice.
No.
Time. The time for the sacrifice begins at the time of the Eid prayer and extends until sunset on the 3rd day after Eid al-Adha. Recommended actions.
These are the days of Tashriq on the Shafi'iyah. We said in Hajj and Eid, we said what? We said that it's haram to fast the days of Tashriq, which is the day of Eid plus 3 days. Yes? So the Shafi'i madhab is long. It's all 4 days altogether. It's all 4 days together. The other madhab will say 3 only. So day of Eid plus 2. Shafi'iyah say day of Eid plus 3. No.
Recommended actions. 5 actions are recommended when slaughtering. One should, number one, say Bismillah. Number two, offer praise upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number three, face the direction of prayer. Number four, say Allahu Akbar. And number five, supplicate for its acceptance. The person offering the sacrifice does not eat from a sacrifice he has sworn to perform, and thus made obligatory upon himself, though he can eat from a voluntary sacrifice.
Okay, so now the ruling in all the madhahib basically is that you don't eat from your udhiyah. What's an udhiyah? What you sacrifice. Now, usually in the Shafi'i madhab, they look at your intention, what you said. Udhiyah is not compulsory upon everyone. Okay, in our madhab. Then what's the case? If you made an oath, you said, I'm going to get this udhiyah, then it becomes compulsory, then you can't eat. Why? It's not for you. Udhiyah is not meant for you. Okay, it's meant for the poor people. It goes to them. But if you didn't, your intention is udhiyah, but you didn't, it's not compulsory upon you. Then how can we say it's haram to eat from it? It becomes halal to eat.
No part of the sacrifice is to be sold. The meat is fed to the poor and destitute. Slaughtering for a newborn. It is recommended to slaughter for a newborn on the 7th day after birth. 2 female sheep are slaughtered for a boy and 1 for a girl. The meat is fed to the poor and destitute.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. So, we'll add, inshallah ta'ala, to the sunnah actions regarding the udhiyah, other than what the author mentioned. Then we'll go into what's halal and haram from animals. So, One of the sunnah actions in udhiyah is to sharpen the knife. Before you do the udhiyah, before you start the animal. Number two, to make the animal lie on its left side. Okay, to lie on its left side, and to tie up the animal so that it doesn't kick around and run away. The third thing is, if it is a camel, to slaughter while it's standing up, you stab it in the throat, basically. You stab it in the throat. It's a sunnah to do that, okay? But not compulsory. And number four, to face the qibla with the animal. To face the qibla with the animal. You don't put the face towards the qibla, but basically you face the animal towards the qibla. And the fifth one is to say Bismillah. And if you say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, it's better. If you don't say Bismillah, what's the ruling? Does it count? Can we eat meat that's not Bismillah? We can in the Shafi'i madhab. You don't have to say Bismillah. It's not a condition unless you are a kitabi, person of the book. So in the Shafi'i madhab, if you're a person of the book, you have to say Bismillah. If you're a Muslim, you don't. Allah Ta'ala's name is with you all the time. Even if you don't say it. It's there with you, khalas. Yes? Many narrations, even in tafsir, many narrations, if you read tafsir ibn Jarir al-Tabari, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ, many narrations say that the Muslim has the name of Allah Ta'ala with him wherever he goes. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do anything, okay? But it's sunnah to say it. Okay? So our issue with slaughtered animals is more about how it's slaughtered, not about did they say Bismillah or not. That's not the main issue. Most people worry about people saying Bismillah. Even the other madhabs, if the person forgot or didn't know, it's halal. Even they say it's conditioned to Bismillah. All the other madhabs, the Maliki, the Hanafi, the Hanabila, they say it's a condition to say Bismillah. But if a person forgot to say Bismillah, it counts still. Why? Because Allah Ta'ala's name is originally of every Muslim. So even the other madhab, it's only if you intentionally didn't say it, that doesn't count. Okay? So Bismillah is alhamdulillah not a big issue. The issue we face today is about what? Is how the animal is slaughtered. That's the issue that we face today. Now. Okay. The sixth thing we mentioned, Abu Shuja mentioned that as well, is to say Allahu Akbar. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Okay? And when people say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, that's how you do it. That's the simplest way. Even better than that is to say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So Bismillah 3 times before, 3 times after. Okay? And then you say, the last one you say Allahu Akbar, Walillahi alhamd. So Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Walillahi alhamd, Bismillah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Walillahi alhamd. The seventh thing is to send salah upon the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now. Okay. What if someone says, Bismillah wasmi Muhammad? Okay, what if someone says that? Okay, if they say the name of Allah Ta'ala and the name of Muhammad, what's the ruling of the animal? And even not the Prophet ﷺ, any other human being other than Allah Ta'ala. Allah says, don't eat from what the name of Allah Ta'ala is mentioned on it. So what does that mean? Okay. If the person says, Bismillah wasmi Muhammadin. So they say in a way that they're both included in the same. If the kasr on both means that they have the same ruling in Arabic. Okay. If the person meant to ask for barakah, it didn't mean he meant he's doing it for Allah Ta'ala, but he just mentioned the name of Prophet for barakah, then it's disliked. It's disliked, but it's not haram. Okay. If the person didn't mean barakah, he just said it like that, it's haram. Okay. If the person meant that they're the same, the Prophet ﷺ takes the same rule, then it's kufr. The person disbelieves in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they're worshipping the Prophet ﷺ, then it's kufr. I know Muslim would do that, but if that was the case, basically. Now. And the eighth thing that is sunnah to do is to make dua that Allah Ta'ala accepts the animal that you're slaughtering. So he says, Allahumma hadihi minka wa ilayk, for example. Okay? Oh Allah, this is for you. The Prophet ﷺ, when he slaughtered, the hadith says, that he says, oh Allah, this is upon me and upon my ummah, except from us. He makes dua what he slaughters. Don't just slaughter. No, make it an act of worship. Make it full. There's dhikr, there's takbir, there's salawat, there's dua at the end. That's how the slaughter should be. Yes? And then the ninth thing is that when the person slaughters, they put pressure on the knife as they're going back and forth. They don't just make sure the blood comes and then leave it. No, they make sure they continue and they finish it properly, and they don't make the animal punish and suffer, basically. Now, okay. All right. After that, one more thing I want to talk about, inshallah ta'ala, is anyway, one more thing I want to talk about, inshallah ta'ala, before we continue, is what things are halal and what things are haram in Sharia, okay, in Islam. So if something is from an animal, it has rulings. If it's from other than an animal, it has rulings, okay? Things that don't come from an animal, they're not originally from an animal. So plants, things that grow, things that and from nature, but they're not animals, then the original case is that they are halal unless proven otherwise. Okay, so if something, for example, if there's a drink that you get, someone gives you a drink, someone gives you something to eat, someone gives you a piece of sweet, a piece of cake, it's originally halal unless proven otherwise. Okay, so if it has alcohol, then that's something exempted. It's haram, for example. That's one thing. If the type of food you're receiving from someone is an animal product, okay, so it comes from the inside of an animal, okay, the inside of an animal, then it's originally haram unless proven halal. Has gelatin in it, has animal fat in it. We don't know, maybe it's halal or maybe it's haram. It's haram unless proven halal. Yeah, haram unless proven halal. Okay, if someone gives you cheese, what's the ruling? It's halal. Why? Because cheese can be from other than an animal. It doesn't have to have animal in it. It could have non-animal in it, so it's halal. Okay, you don't have to look into it, for example. You don't have to doubt about all the cheese you have. But if someone gives you a piece of meat, it's haram unless proven halal. You can't say, I can just assume it's halal and eat. You can't do that. Okay, if someone gives you gelatin, it's haram unless proven halal. Same thing. Someone gives you broth, soup, I don't know, and it's animal soup, then it's haram. Someone gives you soup, you don't know if it's animal or it's halal. If you can tell it's meat, then no, it's haram unless proven halal. No. But that's regarding other than animals, okay, and animals. Now, animals themselves, when you're talking about the specific animal or the creation of Allah Ta'ala, before it's slaughtered, then originally it's halal if it's slaughtered. So let's say you've got kangaroos, you've got I don't know, deers, you've got sheep. All animals are halal other than the animals that are specifically not halal. Okay? But once they're slaughtered, you don't know if it's slaughtered in an Islamic way or not, then it becomes haram and it's proven halal. Clear? So animals, if you're looking at it as a being, then it's halal if it's slaughtered correctly. If we doubt that it's slaughtered correctly or not, then it's haram and it's proven halal. Basically. Okay. After that, now, yes, we okay, so basically there are three types of animals that are haram. Three types of animals that are haram, or let's say three types of living beings. Okay, so in Arabic, hayawan means living being, including a person. Okay, so to eat, there are three types of living beings that are haram to eat, even if they are slaughtered. Even if they are slaughtered. Okay, what are they? The first one is mankind, human beings. It's haram to eat a human being no matter what. There's no exemption. Okay, it's haram to eat a human being no matter what. Second thing is donkeys and mules. Donkeys and mules. They are haram to eat in the Shafi'i madhab no matter what. Okay? So horses are halal to eat. Horses are halal to eat in the Shafi'i madhab. Camels are halal to eat in the Shafi'i madhab. Other things you add are halal to eat. It's a donkey or a mule, it's not halal to eat. Okay. The third thing is what Abu Shuja mentioned, مَسْتَخْبَثَتْهُ الْعَرَبِ. What Arabs consider to be disgusting. Okay? Basically they say this is the Arabs who were in a good situation, not the Arabs who were poor. The Arabs, they say the kings of the Arabs, the leaders of the Arabs, people of Quraysh, those people. Okay? Anything that is disgusting according to them, because the Quran was sent down to them. Yes? And Allah says in the Quran, يحرم عليكم الخبائث. He makes it haram. Anything disgusting is haram. Okay. So for example, they say worms, all types of worms and animals that are like worms are haram. Okay. You don't go and eat snails, for example. خلاص. Even if someone says Bismillah and I cook them, you don't eat snails in Shafi'i madhab. It's not permissible. Okay. Flies, insects, they're haram. Even if someone says Bismillah, you can't eat them. Okay. Unless you're Maliki, you can't eat them. Okay. The only exemptions they say are the locusts, a bub, that lizard that I said, that long lizard in the desert, and rabbits. Rabbits are also halal, even though they're similar to some types of small animals, but it's not disgusting. SubhanAllah. Rabbits, they're accepted and eaten. Arabs eat rabbits until today. If you go to Egypt, they love to eat rabbits. It's a delicacy. Yeah. Okay. طيب. The fourth thing that is haram, other than what Arabs consider disgusting, is every animal that has we said claws, canines, basically. Yes. Okay. That hunt with the canines, and every bird that hunts with their beak. So for example, eagles would be haram to eat. Okay. What's the other one that's similar to an eagle? Falcons. Yes. Would be haram to eat. Albaz. Yeah. Dogs. Wolves. Lions. Also, the fuqaha in all the madhab other than Malikiya, they consider elephants to be the same one of these. Okay. So in other than Maliki madhab, even though elephants don't hunt with the tongue, they consider it to be the same. All the fuqaha, Hanbalis, the Hanafis and the Shafi'is, they say elephant is haram as well. They put it under the same category. That's what they say. Hyena, they say it uses its mouth, but it doesn't hunt. The teeth are not as big. Anyway, the hyena has a special hadith saying it's permissible. That's the reason. Okay. But elephants take the same ruling, even though they don't hunt. Okay, see, Jamil. Okay, let's talk about that now. That's the next thing, but let's talk about it. If something lives in the sea, okay, we said dead animals in the sea are halal, yes? Okay, if they live in the sea their whole life and they can't live outside the sea. So fish, prawns, lobsters, jellyfish, starfish, whatever, as long as it's not poisonous, squid, you can eat all of those things, okay? If they live outside the sea, they can live outside, like crocodiles and other things, it's haram. Okay? It's haram to eat. If they live in both, like crabs and other things, then the mu'tamad official position is haram also. Okay. Yes, even though there's different types. The famous opinion is that you don't eat crabs. Although there's some Shafi'is close right now. I know brothers and sisters in Malaysia and Asia and Singapore, they take that fatwa that it's permissible to eat. There is some scholars, but the famous opinion in the madhab is that it's not halal to eat crabs because they live inside and outside the water as well. But the crabs are allowed in the Hanbali madhab. And also the Maliki madhab. So, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of flexibility on crabs. But lobsters, they have fine. There's nothing wrong with that, for example. So instead of ordering a crab, order lobster. It's more expensive, but yeah. That's nice. Okay. Yes, and then so another thing, the fifth thing that is haram to eat in the Shafi'i madhab are things that we are not allowed to kill. That's haram to kill. So Prophet said, don't kill certain animals. Okay? If an animal is told not to kill, then you can't kill and eat it. You're told not to kill it. Okay? So it becomes haram. Okay? One of these examples is what is known as al-hudhud. Hudhud is a bird that went to Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam. Yes, it's a beautiful bird. We were told not to kill the hudhud. You can't go and slaughter and eat it. Doesn't work. Okay? Another thing is the frog. ضفدع. Okay, you're not supposed to kill frogs in Sharia. You can't eat frogs. Okay, so all the French cuisine was saying today, snails, it's all haram. Okay, the liver puree, all haram. Okay, one more thing is bees, and the last thing is ants. All these things, the hadith saying not to kill them. You can't eat them. Okay. The sixth thing that's haram is what we're told to kill. These animals were ordered to kill. Okay, they're dangerous animals. You're ordered to kill them, not to eat them, but to kill them means to get rid of them. Then they're also haram to eat. Okay. Like example, snakes, mice, crows, and that lizard that poisonous liver. What is it called? No, the lizard that spits. Geckos. Yeah. الوزغ. Yeah. We're told to kill these things. Okay. طيب. Other than animals, we said generally it's halal. Okay, what is haram from what's not an animal? What are the things that haram? Whatever is harmful is haram. Okay, first thing, whatever is harmful. That's number one. That's known as ad-dar. And the scholars, when they say harmful, it means this is a severe harm. Yes, severe harm. So something that would affect your body severely would be haram. So eating an animal that is poisonous, for example, or not animal, but animals. Now we say eating a plant that's poisonous, drinking something that's poisonous, taking something it's haram. Why? Because it harms you. Okay. The second thing is that something that is mustaqdar, disgusting. It's not najis here, like the animal, no. But it's haram to eat things that are still pure but disgusting. For example, it's haram to swallow your phlegm if it reaches your mouth. If it goes into your mouth, you can't swallow it back. Why? Because it's disgusting. Even though it's pure, it's nothing wrong with it. Okay, it's haram to swallow anything like that that's disgusting, that is considered things that come out of the body like that are not najis. You still can't swallow them. Why? Because it's not halal to swallow things, to consume things that are disgusting in Sharia. No. Okay. The fuqaha here, they mention things like fluid that come out of a person, sexual fluids, things like that. We mentioned that it's haram for a husband and wife to swallow those things. Why? Because it's najis. Yeah. طيب. Okay. Where is the slides? Flying animals. So most birds are halal. Most birds are halal. The ones that are not birds of prey, they're halal. And then there's certain birds that we're told not to kill. Yeah. Bats. My understanding is that they're disgusting, but I'll confirm with you later, inshallah. But my understanding is not permissible. I don't know what's happened to the screen. Okay. Does anyone have the book with them? Okay. The next section we have is sports. Okay. So here, this section is known as a section of sabq and rami. What does that mean? Throwing animals and racing. Okay. And some scholars call this section a section of musabaqa. Okay. And this section, Imam Muzani and others mentioned that Imam Shafi'i was the first person to ever write about this section in fiqh, subhanAllah. And that's why he was the first person to put together all of the sections of fiqh in one book, was Imam Shafi'i. Now, basically, it's recommended for males who are fit and capable to participate in activities with the intention that basically that it serves or it encourages or it supports halal types of fighting, of jihad, that are permissible in Islam. So a person should be always trained. You should always be trained if you're a male, whether it involves money or not. So if the type of sport you're doing, like you said, you're horse riding, you're doing things that train you, then even if it involves money, it's halal. Okay, it's no, I'm talking about physical things. Yeah. Okay, for ladies, it's permissible. Sports are permissible if there's no involvement of money. Of course, if it's between men and women, so men and women they're playing together, then it's not permissible. And if the sport leads to something haram, an outcome is haram, then it also becomes haram. It becomes a haram sport, of course. No. If there's no reason, it's just a general sport, there's no specific reason for it, then the sport is permissible and there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Abu Shuja says, وتصح المسابقة على الدواب والمناضلة إذا كانت المسافة معلومة وصفة المناضلة معلومة ويخرج العوض أحد المتسابقين حتى إذا سبقه استرده وإن سبق أخذه صاحبه له وإن أخرجاه معا لم يجوز إلا أن يدخل بينهما محللا فإن سبق أخذ العوض وإن سبق لم يغرم.
Racing and marksmanship contests are permissible provided the distance and parameters for the marksmanship are defined. The wager is taken from one of the participants such that if he wins, he takes it back, and if he loses, it is taken from him. If both participants offer a wager, the contract is not permissible until an additional non-wagering participant, Muhallil, enters the contest. He takes the wager if he wins, and he loses nothing if he does not.
Does it make sense? Basically, if we want to both put money together for this game that we're playing for this race, then we can't both put in money and then whoever wins takes the money. It has to be either a third person putting money in or just one of us puts the money. So I put money. If you win, I'm going to give you the money. If not, I'll take my own money back. But you can't do that type of gambling where you both put in money and then one loses, one wins. That's haram in Sharia, basically. Okay? Unless someone else comes in and puts in money so that there's no loss, basically. Okay, that's it. طيب, inshallah, we want to focus now on Ayman and Nudur, the most important section here we have. Then the last section is very simple. Okay, Ayman and Nudur, basically swearing and taking oaths in Sharia. Okay, Al-Yamin is one type and another is another type. Yamin means to swear by Allah Ta'ala. Say Wallah, for example. Okay, Yamin or swearing is either done in an argument or outside of in an argument or outside of an argument. Okay, if it's done in an argument, there's specific rulings that we've already taken. What are they? The rulings of qasama, of li'an, of other stuff. We said if a person believes that this is not his son, that his wife, for example, they have to swear, they have to take an oath. Yes, there's rulings for that in the different sections. Qasama, when someone is claiming that this person killed that other person. Yes, 50 people come from their family and they swear. We took that before as well. These are all specific types of swearing. We're not talking about that here now. The type of swearing we're talking about is a swearing outside of an argument in front of a judge. A swearing that happens, basically, someone says wallahi about something in their daily life. That's what we're going to talk about now. Okay? Okay. If the swearing is done outside of an argument, it's also three types. Number one, what is known as laghul yamin. Someone, they just say something without meaning it. Wallahi, billahi, tallahi, they didn't even mean it. Okay, we'll talk about that. That doesn't count as anything. Number two, something that's forced. Someone forces you to swear. Doesn't count. And the last one is an intentional yameen, intentional swearing that happens. And this counts, and there's specific rulings for it. Okay, what are the rulings of this? Okay. This intentional yameen has 4 pillars to it. The first thing is the person who is swearing, what they swear by, what they swear to do, and the wording of the swearing. Okay. Now, the person who is swearing has to be mukallaf, has to be mature, has to be in his full mind, has to choose to say what they say, not to be forced. Number 3, to speak clearly and not just, basically make sign language unless the person is not able to speak. Then sign language counts if the sign language is clear to everyone. Okay. And the last thing is the intention. Okay. So if a person didn't mean to say that, it just came by accident, it doesn't count. But if you intend to make that oath, then it counts. Okay. What are the conditions of the thing that is being sworn or what is being sworn upon. Okay. You have to, in order for your swearing to count as a Islamic swearing that has an effect, it has to either be by one of the names of Allah Ta'ala or the attributes of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Okay? What does this mean? Number one, it could be a name of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala that no one other than Allah Ta'ala is named by, is called by. Okay? Like Allah. Okay? Allah. Or Al-Hayy Alladhi La Yamut. Now, this is not in the 99 names, but it's still a name, yes? Who is Al-Hayy Alladhi La Yamut? No one else says that, okay? Rabbul Alameen. Yeah? If you swear by this, there's no conditions. Immediately, by saying that, your oath counts. Your swearing counts. Number two, if it's a name of Allah Ta'ala, that is usually only used for Allah Ta'ala, but in some cases, it might be used for other than Allah Ta'ala. For example, Ar-Rahim. Yes, Rahim is something merciful. Other than Allah Ta'ala can be called. This person is Rahim, yeah? But usually it's only used for Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Then it counts unless you intend otherwise. Okay? So without intention, it still counts. As long as you don't intend other than Allah Ta'ala. Number three, if it's the name of Allah Ta'ala that is used for Allah Ta'ala and for other than Allah Ta'ala. Okay, like what? Al-Hayy, the living. Al-Mawjood, the existing. Okay? Al-Alim. Yes? These things, then you have to intend that is Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for it to count. These are the conditions of all these different types. Okay. What about the attributes of Allah Ta'ala? Attributes here, they're not the same attributes that we study in Aqidah. Aqidah, an attribute means what? It has a specific meaning, something that basically is specific to Allah Ta'ala, and there's a whole detail to it. Attribute here means something that Allah Ta'ala can be described by in the Quran. So, the power of Allah Ta'ala, the greatness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the kibriya of Allah Ta'ala, okay? Something like that. Something that's specific to Allah Ta'ala. So you're not using a name, but you're using something that has the same meaning. It tells you Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Then it also counts, okay? If someone says by the Quran, by the Mus'haf, what does it count? They swear by the Quran. Does it count? Huh? Element that doesn't count. Depends. Okay. If you mean by the Quran the word of Allah Ta'ala, then it counts. If you mean the ink or the book, then it doesn't count. Okay. In Aqidah, we studied that. We said that the word of Allah Ta'ala is not what's written down, yes, but the Arabic letters and stuff, that is, of course, that does not count. But if you mean the word of Allah Ta'ala, then yes, it counts. It counts. And it is نعم. طيب. Okay. We're up to now. We said the okay, what you are swearing upon or doing, okay? The condition for it to count is that you're not swearing to do something that's already compulsory. Okay? So, for example, something that is compulsory, how can I explain it? Something that must happen no matter what, even if you don't change it. Okay? Let's say, Wallahi, I am not going to be here and there at the same time. It's wajib aqlan. Doesn't count as yameen properly, okay? But it has to be something that's possible to happen, something that's possible that you can change. That's the things that that counts. Okay. What letters are we allowed to use to swear by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala? Okay. Swearing happens with one of the letters of qasam in Arabic. The letters of qasam. What are the letters of qasam? The first one is ba. So you say billahi. Okay, billahi. The second one, and the ba usually is used with what? With one of the names, the clear names of Allah Ta'ala. Billahi, bir-Rahman, something like that. Okay. And you can also use it for the dhama'ir. You can say bihi, meaning billah Ta'ala. The second one is al-waw. Al-waw. So wallahi. Okay, wallahi can only be used with the names of Allah. It can't be used with huwa, It doesn't work. Yes, you say Wallahi, War-Rahman, War-Rahim, something like that. And the last one is a ta in Arabic, okay? Tallahi, okay? And Tallahi can only be used with the name Allah only, nothing else. Just the name of not Tar-Rahman, Tallahi only, okay? That's it. So Tar-Rahman, for example, something Tarabb al-Kaaba, some Arabs used to use it, but it's not famous. It only counts if you intend it, but if you don't intend it, it doesn't count, basically. Okay. So, for example, an example of a swearing that counts would be Muhammad says, Wallahi, I will enter this house, for example, okay? Or he says, for example, Wallahi, I will not enter the house. And then he enters the house. He's broken his swearing. He has to compensate because of that, basically. Okay, that's an example of that, basically. Now, what happens if a person breaks the swearing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What happens? You have to do one of three. Okay, you have to do one of three. The first thing is to free a slave. To free a slave. Free a slave. The second one is to feed 10 poor people. To feed 10 poor people. And the third one is what? To clothe 10 poor people. Clothe 10 poor people. Okay. If you can't do them, then you go to the last option, which is fasting. Only if you can't do one of those two. But so you can't, do you want to read inshallah ta'ala? Yes.
An oath, yamin, does not become binding unless it includes mention of Allah Most High, one of His names, or one of His attributes. Whoever vows to give his property as charity must choose between giving all of his property, giving away all of his property, or making an expiation for breaking an oath. No expiation is necessary for oaths being made unthinkingly. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken his oath if he performs something else. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken his oath if he orders someone else to perform it. If one swears to avoid two things, he has not broken his oath if he performs just one of them. Expiation for broken oaths. To perform the expiation for broken oaths, one chooses between three options: manumission of a Muslim slave, feeding 10 of the poor, giving each one 0.51 liters or 1 mud of food, or clothing each a single article of clothing, or when one is incapable of riba, fasting 3 days.
Okay. Right. Okay. Fasting 3 days to spring. Okay. Yes. So that's clear inshallah ta'ala. We are that next section سيدي وفصل ويلزم والنذر يلزم في المجازاة على مباح وطاعة كقوله إن شفى الله مريضي فلله علي أن أصلي أو أصوم أو أتصدق ويلزمه من ذلك أن يقع ما يقع عليه الإثم ولا نذر في معصية كقوله إن قتلت فلانا لله علي كذا ولا يلزم النذر على ترك مباح كقوله لا آكل لحما أو لا أشرب لبنا وما أشبه ذلك.
Vows. A vow to perform something that is lawful or an act of worship that has been made contingent upon some event is binding. It is like saying, if Allah cures my patient, I owe Allah that I pray, or fast, or give charity. What is required is anything given the same name as what was mentioned. Vows for acts of disobedience are not binding, such as saying, if I murder so-and-so, I must do such and such. Vows to abstain from or to perform something lawful, mubah, are not binding, such as saying, I will not eat meat, nor will I drink milk. And what reason is this?
Okay, alhamdulillah. So the second type is vowing. What's the difference? You don't say wallahi, tallahi, billahi. Okay, when you take a vow, it means to make compulsory upon yourself what was not compulsory beforehand. Okay, that's what a vow is. So Allah Ta'ala did not make these things compulsory for you. You decide to make them compulsory on yourself. In fiqh, it works. So you can actually make things compulsory that were not compulsory beforehand. Okay, so if you say, for example, you enter the masjid, you say لله علي أن أعتكف مدة بقائي في هذا المسجد. You say that Allah Ta'ala has upon me that I'm going to do i'tikaf as long as I'm in this masjid. I'm going to intend. It becomes compulsory to intend i'tikaf then. And you get the reward of doing something compulsory. It wasn't compulsory beforehand. Okay, so you're changing something. Saying wallahi is a totally different thing. Yeah, it's totally different. Okay. Now, subhanallah, in some cases, using another vowing is encouraged. Okay. For example, like I said, if you're basically going to force yourself to do something that is good, but if you're just trying to force Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do something good, then it might be a case of not having full adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if someone says, oh, Allah ta'ala, if you do this and I'll give you this, there's a bit of difference there. That's why in some narrations that another comes from a person who is stingy, who is doesn't want to give to Allah ta'ala, he wants something in return. So if it's done out of that intention, you don't do it with the intention that you're trying to get something out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, generally, if a person vows for any reason, basically it happens and it counts if you vow something that is not compulsory. That is not compulsory, okay? That's when it counts. So you make something permissible or sunnah, for example, you make it compulsory for yourself. And he says here, not if you do it about something haram, doesn't count, okay? Why? Can you make something haram halal? Is that what? Can you? You can't. Can you make something haram compulsory? You can't. So you're not changing it, okay? Nadr is about changing it, basically, okay? Other than that, the majority of the rulings of nadr are similar to al-yamin and to swearing. Inshallah, we'll go into al-aqdiya wal-shahadat, inshallah ta'ala, because we don't have much time. He says here, وَلَا يَجُوزُ أَنْ يَلِيَ الْقَضَاء إلا من استكملت فيه 15 خصلة: الإسلام والبلوغ والعقل والحرية والذكورية والعدالة ومعرفة الكتاب والسنة ومعرفة الإجماع ومعرفة الخلاف ومعرفة طرق الاجتهاد ومعرفة الطرف من لسان العربي ومعرفة تفسير كتاب الله تعالى وأن يكون سميعا وأن يكون بصيرا وأن يكون كاتبا وأن يكون مستيقظا. ويستحب الجلوس في وسط البلد في موضع بارز للناس لا حاجب له ويقعد للناس في المسجد ويسوي بين الخصمين في 3 أشياء: في المجلس واللفظ والحظ. ولا يجوز أن يقبل الهدية من أهل عمله. ويجتنب القضاء في 10 مواضع عند الغضب والجوع والعطش والشهوة شدة الشهوة والحزن والفرح والمفرط والمرض والمدافعة الأخبثين وعند النعاس وشدة الحر والبرد. ولا يسأل المدعى عليه إلا بعد كمال الدعوة ولا يحلف إلا بعد سؤال المدعى ولا يلقن خصيما حجة ولا يفهمه كلاما ولا يتعنت بالشهداء ولا يقبل الشهادة إلا ممن ثبتت عدالته ولا يقبل شهادة عدو على عدو ولا شهادة والد لولده ولا ولد لوالده ولا يقبل كتاب قاض إلى قاض في الأحكام إلا بعد شهادة الشاهدين فيما فيه.
Judges. It's not permissible for one to be appointed a judge unless he has fulfilled 15 conditions. The judge must be a Muslim, be mature, be of sound mind, be free, be male, be upright, know the rulings from the Quran and Sunnah, no scholarly consensus, no scholarly variance, know the ways of independent reasoning, know Arabic linguistics and philology and explication of the Quran, possess eyesight, possess hearing, possess the ability to write, and be alert. Etiquette. It's recommended that the judge be situated in the middle of the region, in a place people can find with ease. He should not have a doorman and should not hold court within the The judge must treat both parties equally in 3 things: where they sit, how he addresses them, and eye contact. It's not permissible for him to accept a gift from people associated with his work. He avoids deciding cases on 10 occasions: when he is angry, hungry, thirsty, feels sexual desire, sadness, or joy to the extent that it causes negligence, is sick, needs to relieve himself, is drowsy, or is extremely hot or cold. The judge does not question the defendant until the claim is complete, and he does not have the defendant swear an oath until the plaintiff asks. It does not help either party formulate their proof against the opponent, nor does he explain how to make an allegation. He does not badger the witness, nor accept testimony except from a witness whose uprightness has been established. He does not accept an enemy testifying against his enemy, a son testifying for his father, or a father for his son. A judge's written ruling that is sent to another judge is not accepted until 2 witnesses testify concerning its contents.
Okay. This section of fiqh is a bit of a complicated section and it's not used much for us. Basically, a person who is judges between people originally has to be what's known as a mujtahid, okay? Has to be able to be like Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, Imam Malik, who are able to look at the Quran and Sunnah and get the rulings immediately and judge between people, okay? Because this doesn't happen anymore, judges now don't take these conditions, but their condition is to give a ruling according to one of the madhabs of the scholars who had these conditions. So judges now, they judge according to either the Maliki madhab, the Hanbali madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, the Hanafi madhab, and according to whatever they're assigned, whatever they're employed by, they have to give judge according to that matter. They can't change it. They can't do anything when you're judging now. And then he mentioned the adab of being a judge, of course. Sayyidi, can we continue, inshallah, the next section?
Dividing property. Someone who divides property for the court must meet 7 conditions. The person must be Muslim, mature, of sound mind, free, male, upright, and trained in arithmetic. If 2 or more parties agree that a particular person performs the division for them, the above conditions are not required. If the division requires an assessment of value, there cannot be less than 2 appraisals. If one partner invites the other partner to divide their property, and there is no harm in doing so, he must comply.
Continue, Sayyidi.
Evidence. If the plaintiff possesses testimonial evidence, the judge listens to it and judges according to it. If the plaintiff lacks testimonial evidence, then the defendant's word accompanied by his oath is relied upon. If the defendant refuses to swear an oath, the burden returns to the plaintiff who swears an oath and thereby deserves whatever is claimed. If both parties claim something that one of them has in his possession, the word of the one who possesses it, combined with his oath, is what is relied upon. If the contested item is in their joint possession, they both swear an oath, and the item is divided between them. Whosoever swears an oath about his actions, whether affirmative or negative, swears about it absolutely. Whosoever swears an oath about another's action, if he affirms their actions, then he swears about it absolutely. If he negates their actions, then he swears a negation of knowledge of its occurrence. Testimony. Testimony is not accepted except from someone with 5 attributes. One must be Muslim, mature, of sound mind, free, and upright. There are 5 conditions for being upright. One must avoid each of the enormities, kaba'ir, not persist in even a small amount of minor sins, sagha'ir, have sound beliefs, restrain oneself when angry, adhere to the common standards of observant Muslims of one's time and place.
Now, these are conditions. Okay, in Ramadan, in fasting, we said there has to be a person when you make when you testify in front of a judge, you have to have the conditions of a adala. Yes, the conditions of testifying in Shafi'i in any section of fiqh. These are the conditions. So, subhanallah, a lot of Muslims today wouldn't fall into these conditions, subhanallah. But this is what I mentioned.
Rights. There are 2 types of rights. Rights owed to Allah. Rights owed to Allah. Human beings. Human rights. With respect to witnesses, there are 3 types of rights owed to humans. Matters through which money is not sought and that are typical for men to observe. Only 2 male witnesses are accepted. Matters through which money is sought, 2 male witnesses, 1 male witness, and 2 female witnesses, or 1 male witness and the plaintiff's sworn oath are accepted. And matters which are not typically observed by men, 2 men, 1 man, and 2 women, or 4 women are accepted. Divine rights. A woman's testimony is never accepted for rights owed to Allah. With respect to witnesses, there are 3 types of rights owed to Allah. Fornication, less than 4 male witnesses are never accepted. Punishments other than fornication, 2 male witnesses are accepted. Inciting the crescent moon at the beginning of Ramadan, 1 individual male witness is accepted. Inadmissible testimony. Testimony from a blind witness is inadmissible except in 5 cases: death, lineage, general ownership, translation, and things witnessed before becoming blind. And for example, when someone tells him something, he immediately takes the speaker by the hand in order to present him to the judge and testifies to what was said. It's permissible for anyone to provide testimony which personal benefit is derived and the person harm is avoided.
Now, okay. Yeah, let's read the last section, inshallah. He then says, كتاب العتق ويصح العتق من كل مالك جائز التصرف في ملكه. العتق بصريح العتق والكتابة معنية. وإذا أعتق عبد عتق جميعه. وإذا أعتق شريكا له في عبد وهو وهو سار العتق إلى باقيه وكان عليه قيمة نصيب شريكه ومن ملك واحدا من والديه أو مولوده عتق عليه. نعم.
Emancipation of slaves. Emancipation is valid from every slave owner who is entitled to dispose of his
So
own.
basically, someone owns a slave, they can free them. How do you free someone? Just with a word saying that you're free, khalas. That's it. That's how it happens. Okay. No. And it's very recommended in Islam. Prophet ﷺ says, whoever frees a slave, Allah Ta'ala will free every part of you from the hellfire just because you freed that slave. So your head will be freed from the hellfire because you freed the head of that slave. Your arm will be freed from the hellfire because you freed the arm of that slave. And said even to the extent of the most detailed part in your body will be freed because you freed that slave. No.
Emancipation is valid from every slave owner who is entitled to dispose of his own property. Emancipation occurs through an explicit phrase or an elusive phrase accompanied by intention. The entire slave.
Okay, so basically, if a person says, I free you, khalas. Okay. Or there can be an agreement between them that the slave wants to buy the man themselves. So they go and work 1 day a week and they pay a certain amount of money. And then, let's say I'm gonna buy myself over 2 years of working and I'll buy my own freedom. That can also happen as well. That's the second way of freeing a slave now.
The entire slave is set free when the owner frees just a portion. When
So if a person says, your hand is free, khalas. Yeah, it's gone. No. And the same thing we said in divorce. Yes, if someone says to their wife that your hand is divorced, khalas. Because can you break that? Isn't that part of the person? If that's divorce, it means the rest of you is divorced. Yes, because it's a part of you. That's what it means. Same thing. If your hand's free, then it means the rest of you is free. No.
When the owner frees his portion of the slave, if he is not poor, the emancipation extends to the entire slave. He must pay the value of his partner's portions to his partner.
No. This is an interesting ruling. So basically, say three people have a slave together. They all own a slave together. Okay. And one of them wanted to free the slave. Okay. One of them wanted to free the slave. Immediately, depending on the situation of the person, you have to continue to make the slave free and buy the rest of the parts. Why? Because Islam encourages to free the slave no matter what. No.
When one takes possession of his own parents or children, the relative is automatically set free.
No. So if you buy one of your forefathers or one of your offsprings, by buying them, they become free. You don't have to free them straight away. No. Prophet ﷺ says in Sunan Abu Dawud, لن يجزي والدا ولده إلا أن يجده مملوكا فيعتقه. There's no way that a son would pay back their father other than finding them as a slave and buying them and freeing them. The next section he says الولاء. فصل الولاء من حقوق العتق وحكمه حكم التعصيب عند عدمه وينتقل الولاء عن المعتق إلى الذكور من عصبته وترتيب العصبات في الولاء كترتيبهم في الإرث ولا يجوز بيع الولاء ولا هبته.
Wala is a right associated with emancipation. Its ruling is akin to the inheritance ruling in the absence of the deceased universal inheritor. Upon death, wala passes from the one who freed the slave to the deceased male's universal inheritance. The order for universal inheritance here is as their order for inheritance. It is not permissible to sell wala nor to give it as a gift.
What is wala? Wala, basically, if someone frees someone, what happens is that Islam makes it that there's a bond between them, okay? There's a connection. Just like as if the person was one of your kids, was born from you, okay? When do we go back to this? Only if the person, let's say he dies and he has no one to inherit him, then that person can inherit him. Okay? Only if there's no one to inherit them from the family. So basically, it's a secondary bond. But the Prophet says, "Al-wala'u luhmatun ka-luhmati nasab." Yes, that the wala is a connection, just like it's a blood connection, just like subhanallah being born from someone. Okay. He then says, فصل ومن قال لعبده إذا مت فأنت حر فهو مدبر يعتق بعد وفاته من ثلثه ويجوز أن يبيعه في حال حياته ويبطل تدبيره وحكم المدبر في حال الحياة في حال حياة السيد حكم العبد القن.
stipulating freedom upon death. If the owner tells a slave, "You are free upon my death," the slave becomes a mudabbar. He is set free from his master's debt from the top 1/3 of the estate. It's permissible for the owner to sell the slave while he is alive. Selling the slave invalidates the slave being set free upon the owner's death. A slave who will be set free upon his owner's death is the same as a fully owned slave.
Okay, so there's one ruling in Sharia regarding the slaves, which is known as mudabbar. Basically, the person is a slave until the master dies, and then they become free straight away. If the master says, "You're free when I die," okay? If this happens, they're known as al-mudabbar. What's dubar mean? Dubar means the end of something, okay? So, as long as the master doesn't sell the slave throughout his life, then he's a mudabbar. Then he is a mudabbar. Now, a slave who is sold while they're mudabbar, they're no longer mudabbar, yes? Why? Because you're not going to be owned by that person. So if he frees you after he's dead and you're not owned by him, you have to be owned by him the time that he frees you to be free, basically. That's it, okay? Basically, the slave, as long as this master is alive, they have all the rulings of a slave. Only happens when they die. Okay, that's mudabbar. The next section is going to be al-walad, and the last section is going to be the next one is going to be al-kitab, and the last one is going to be al-walad. These are two different situations of a slave as well. The next one is going to be when a slave wants to buy their own freedom. Okay, it's known as al-kitab. He says, فصل والكتابة مستحبة إذا سألها العبد وكان مأمونا مكتسبا ولا تصح إلا بمال معلوم ويكون مؤجلا إلى أجل معلوم وأقله نجمان وهي من جهة السيد لازمة ومن جهة العبد المكاتب جائزة فله فسخها متى شاء والمكاتبة تصرف فيما في يده من مال وللمكاتب التصرف فيما في يده من مال وعلى السيد أن يضع من مال الكتابة ما يستعين به على أداء نجوم الكتابة ولا يعتق إلا بعد أداء جميع المال.
Buy one's freedom. If a slave requests to purchase his freedom, kitaba, it is recommended that the owner accept the request if the slave is trustworthy and employed. The contract is not valid unless there is a specified amount that is deferred to a known date. The amount must be paid in at least 2 installments. The owner cannot revoke the contract, although the slave is entitled to do so whenever he wishes. A slave who is purchasing his freedom is entitled to dispose of property in his possession. It is obligatory for the owner to reduce a portion of the man's submission price so that the slave can use it to help pay the installments. The slave is not set free until he has paid the price in full.
Okay, we've spoken about this many times. We said if a slave wants to buy his own freedom, there has to be an agreement, and it has to be specific amount of money, specific amount of time. Every month I'm going to pay you this much, okay? And we said in Sharia, this slave could take from zakat, yes, to pay his okay. Now, the slave, if he wants to stop paying, it's up to him. But the owner, once he agrees, he can't go and say, "I don't want you to pay anymore." It's not up to him anymore. Listen, okay? And the slave is still a slave in Sharia, until the last dirham, the last dollar, the last cent he pays, then he becomes free. Only after he pays it all. Now, the last section we have here is al-walad. Okay? فصل وإذا أصاب السيد أمته فوضعت, and this is important because this shows you that slavery in Islam is not something that we look forward to. It's something that we try to get rid of. Okay? It says وإذا أصاب السيد أمته فوضعت ما يتبين فيه شيء من خلق آدمي حرم عليه بيعها ورهنها وهبتها وجاز له التصرف فيها بالاستخدام والوطء وإذا مات السيد عتقت من رأس ماله قبل الديون والوصايا وولدها من غيره بمنزلتها ومن أصاب أمة غيره بنكاح فولده منها مملوك لسيدها وإذا أصابها بشبهة فولده منها حر وعليه قيمة للسيد وإن ملك الأمة المطلقة بعد ذلك لم تصر أم ولد بالوطء في النكاح وصارت أم ولد بالوطء وبالشبهة على أحد القولين.
If a slave owner impregnates a slave and she gives birth to something resembling a human being, she becomes an al-walad, and he may not sell her, use her as collateral, or give her as a gift. He may put her to work, i.e. hire her out, and have sex with her. When he dies, she is set free from the top of the estate before the payment of debts and distributions and bequests. Her child from another man, after giving birth to her master's child, follows her in this ruling. Whoever impregnates his wife, who is another person's slave, the child becomes the property of the owner. If one impregnates a slave through dubious intercourse, his child from her is free, and he must pay its value to the master. If he purchases a slave to whom he was previously married and then divorced after she had given birth to his child, she does not become an al-walad through him, having had intercourse with her while married, but according to one opinion, she does if he had dubious intercourse with her.
Okay. Jazakumullah khair. Okay, listen. So, al-walad is a specific case when a slave has intercourse with his slave when a master has intercourse with a slave and she has a baby. Now, immediately khalas. Once he passes away, she is free. Okay. So this is known as al-walad, the mother of a um of a of a of a slave girl. So the mother of a son. al-walad, what's specific to her? Basically, the master, once she has a kid, is not allowed to basically to sell her, to use her for anything. All he's allowed to do is he's allowed to use her herself, but not allowed to use her for others. Okay. And once he passes away, she becomes free. Okay. Now, sorry, we're going to finish this now. 1 minute. Inshallah. Okay. So once the master passes away, she's free. Okay. Now, in this case, he can't just keep on producing slaves from her. It's not the same if someone has a slave girl and he marries her off to another man. Okay, so he's not allowed to have intercourse with her now. Khalas. If she's married to someone else, then her kids will become slaves as well. Khalas. But if he's not a slave, he's an owner, and then that's when it becomes al-walad. And then the author mentions that there's a bit of difference between a nikah al-shubha. So if someone by accident thought that she was their wife, and by accident there's something that happened between them, then he mentioned the difference between scholars, if it counts as al-walad or not. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Inshallah, we'll stop here. We ask Allah ta'ala to forgive us, and there's so many things that we didn't touch in this book. We didn't have enough time to finish everything, but inshallah, this is just a very short reading of Abu Shuja. Inshallah, the next book we'll take slowly, inshallah ta'ala. بإذن الله next year, inshallah ta'ala. And we ask Allah ta'ala. Inshallah, we'll make some dua, and then we'll have some questions, inshallah ta'ala. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا مولانا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك. لك الحمد يا ربنا العالمين في الآخرة الأولى، ولك الحكم ولك المصير. اللهم اغفر لنا يا رب العالمين، تقبل منا. اللهم إنا نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك الجنة وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل، ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وهدى وتقى يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه ما لم نعلم، ونعوذ بك من الشر كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه ما لم نعلم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك، نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت، نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.